Hello, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. That all depends on where you're joining us from. It's another LinkedIn Live session, LinkedIn Live Change Conversations. You may be joining us from LinkedIn. We're also streaming on Facebook and on YouTube as well. We're all about inclusivity and diversity and making sure everybody feels included. So, wherever you're joining us from, welcome and thank you for joining us. And my name is Yvonne Ruke. I'm the founder of the Change Leadership. And today, like I mentioned, it's another session of LinkedIn Live Change Conversations. We have these conversations weekly, bi weekly, every other week. But we make sure to come back to you Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern. If you're watching us live, would love for you to drop an emoji and just tell us where you're joining us from. We always want to hear from you. So whether you're joining us live or even if you're watching the rebroadcast of this session, we still want to know where you're joining us from, where in Canada or where around the world you're joining us from. And one thing we do encourage is comment, ask questions, get a chance to interact with myself and the speakers who are joining us today. And today is going to be a very interesting session. If you've ever listened to one of our sessions or if you know anything about the organization, we're all about leading and responding to change in today's dynamic business, ever changing environment. And one of the things that we believe in is that being a change leader is not about position, it's not about title, it's about who you are. So I'm excited today to spotlight two of our guests on this show, and that's Richard and Wanda. They are the current winners, 2023 winners of the Change Leader Awards. And I also have with me Sneher. She is from she's an OCM consultant, and she is a member of the Association of Change Management Professionals, and she was part of the Change Leader Awards committee. So excited to have her on as well. So I'm going to get started with introductions. Starting with you, Wanda, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Yvonne. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here and share a little bit about what we do. So my name is Wanda Bedard. I'm based in Montreal, born and bred here. And I started a metal fabrication business just over 30 years ago and still have that today. But the story that I'll be sharing today is much more to do with the foundation. We started a public foundation in 2006, so it's been 18 years now, and we support education for girls in developing countries.
Wow. I want to ask so many things about that. 60 Million Girls Foundation. Why is it called 60 Million Girls Foundation?
It's a good question. When we started in 2006, that was actually the statistics. So there's 60 million girls of primary school age who should be in school every year who are not. And so I often joke with people and I say our objective is to be down to zero to make sure every girl is in school.
Oh, wow. That's a fantastic objective and goal. Do you know the numbers now?
Yes, it's down to about 32 million girls. I mean, it's still obviously way too many, but it has decreased. There's been really worldwide actions, worldwide movements to get girls to have access to quality education.
We could have a whole session on 60 Million Girls Foundation, but, through this discussion, I hope to learn a little bit more about it. And also, the audience will get to learn a little bit more about, the organization and how you're leading and driving this change. To be down to 50% is significant. It's like amazing. To get one more girl into education is absolutely awesome. That's one life that is changing millions of lives. And then to have done it or to be happy to have been part of the drive to do 30 million is just absolutely phenomenal. So thank you for that. And I want to go to Richard. Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Richard Demaris or Demera. And so I'm a customer success, customer experience, and operations leader. The theme in my career, looking back, has been working with startups predominantly, about 14 years of startup experience, and 7 years with two different Canadian high growth startups, as well as a strong theme in working in the unified communications and unified communications as a service industry. And so conferencing and collaboration would be one of my sweet spots insofar as where my history has taken me thus far.
Thank you so much, Richard. When you introduce yourself and talk about yourself, I just love the broad and diverse background, and it's just really a reminder of where we are today in today's new world of work and future of work. You know, the ability to be fluid and versatile and just diverse in our background. So, Wonder is the Change Leader Award winner community 2023. And Richard is the Change Leader Award winner innovation. And I say this and I smile because I'm about to get Sneha to introduce herself to us. She was part and parcel of the committee in terms of the inaugural committee and inaugural awards in choosing these winners. So Sneha, please introduce yourself.
Again, since the spotlight is on Wanda and Richard, we're not going to spend too much time on me. That was a great introduction you gave, Yvonne. I'm an OCM consultant, and I'm here as a representative of the ACMP. So initially when we started, I was just telling Richard and Wanda as well, right? So I feel like I already know them a little bit. But then like even when we were reading those profiles, I think I can speak for the team when I say that like we could see that, you know, there's a lot of work that's been done just representing that work in a short, like within those buckets. But one of the main things, at least for me personally, that I was seeing is that in terms of leadership, it's not only about a single person leading, it's about creating a whole group of leaders who then go on to propagate that chain, right? And making that difference in the world. And so both Richard and Wanda, I sort of vaguely, I mean, there were a lot of profiles, and I do think that everyone nominated has created a lot of waves in the world. But when going through these profiles, I was specifically looking for that one thing. And like have these folks who've been nominated, is it just about them creating those waves, or are they helping others sort of be a leader in their own style? And these names came out. I think eventually all of the names that we have as winners for the Change Leader Awards, that is one thing that stood out with everyone, right? It's not just about that one person. It's about creating a difference in others' lives and creating a whole generation of leaders. So that's what stuck out for me.
Fantastic. And you know, one of the things I like about, and it's John Maxwell, he talks about the different levels of leadership or leaders. And when you start to get to level 4 and 5, those are people who are leaders of leaders, you know, people who are creating other leaders. And that's how leadership lives on. And that's how we continue to create change. Wanda, I want to come back to you and just tell us about your journey this far. Why did you kick off with, you know, founding, or is it finding or starting, you know, the 60 Million Girls Foundation? You know, tell us about that journey into deciding to drive this change.
Well, the journey actually started probably almost 25 years ago. In 1998, 1999, I just happened to be reading articles about the situation of women in Afghanistan living under Taliban rule. This was before September 11th, and unfortunately, very, very similar to the situation as it is today. So these are stories of women who were basically made to be invisible in their communities. Of course, they had to wear a burqa, covered head to toe. They couldn't vote, they couldn't drive, they couldn't leave home without being accompanied by a male family member, and the girls were not allowed to go to school. And it really bothered me, and it made me angry. And I kept reading these articles. At first, I thought that's impossible. It can't be that women are treated that way. We all know what women can contribute to a society. Why would, you know, the government try to push them aside? And I guess I had been ranting and raving out loud at home for quite some time. And it was a Sunday morning. I was at the breakfast table with my daughters, and I'd read another article, very, very upset. And my oldest daughter turned to me and she said, "Well, Mom, what are you going to do about it?" Original change leader. And it was really that question. It stopped me cold. And I thought, you know, she's right. I can be upset about what's going on in the world, but if I'm not participating and making change, things will stay the way they are. But my background, as I mentioned, I have a BCom and I have an MBA. My background's in management. It's not in international development or women's issues or anything like that. So I spent about the next almost 5 years researching, attending conferences, using my network, talking to anybody who had done any development work. And then with that research, it really became clear to me that it's through education that you provide girls and women with the tools to take control of their life and to really have a voice in the community. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll support girls' education, but how am I going to do that? And so I did some more searching, and I thought I would volunteer for an organization that supports girls' education because I felt that if I volunteered my hours, I could probably have more impact than, just making a donation. I wasn't in a capacity to make $100,000 donations a year. And so I ended up as a volunteer with UNICEF in Montreal and learned a lot, and actually was a very engaged volunteer and was allowed to make a field trip to Mozambique and speak with the specialist in health and education, water and sanitation, and really learned a lot. And then I came back, and UNICEF made the decision to shut down its regional offices. So there was no more volunteer position in Montreal. And that was the impetus to start 60 Million Girls. So I gathered the group of volunteers that I had been working with at UNICEF, and we decided to take things into our own hands, create our own organization, raise funds, and then we would pick and choose the field organizations we'd like to work with.
Oh my gosh. I just love your origin story. I love it because, so many times we sit with mug in hand, popcorn and everything, and we rant and we rave. We go on about everything that is not working right. And this is you saying that something wasn't working right, and your daughter being the catalyst. You decided to do something about that, and that is just so admirable. And even just your origin story, which also shows you started from scratch. It wasn't about waiting for that leader. It wasn't about waiting for somebody else to do it. It was about you finding the opportunities, you doing the groundwork, you researching, you paving the path to making the change and driving the change. And often the times, we want to wait for somebody to do it. We want to be called. We want to say, okay, if somebody's doing it, I'd help, but just a great example of, being a great change leader, and why you are the community change leader winner, so kudos to you. I didn't get to read all of your backgrounds like Sneha and the rest of the committee. I was totally out of the committee.
She had to be.
Yeah.
I was out of the committee. So for anybody out there thinking and wondering, I was part of the selection. No, I wasn't part of the selection. It was totally independent of the change leadership organization and a group of bodies like ACMP, CMI, Change Management Institute, Toronto Change Days, and Harbinger, all coming together for the selection of this winner. So very independent of the organization. Richard, I want to come to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my journey may not be as noble as Wanda's, but hers is a wonderful story. But when I think about when I think about starting from scratch, like she had done, I can draw some similarities and some parallels in my career. So I think it goes back to 2002, and that was the first Canadian startup company that I worked for. And at that time, I was the 5th employee in the company and the first and only employee in what was a very nascent customer success, client services environment. And I found myself needing to adapt or die pretty quickly and to grow and to scale the business naturally. And, that concept of rip and replace whatever you have right now, how can you make it better? Building, coaching, hiring, training, leading, developing a team was a very important concept. And so 7 years later, what was once the company that had just myself as the client services or customer success individual eventually was 25 or 30 people into a department with several different teams. And when I look back, I found that I was instinctively drawn to change. I had to be involved. I wanted to be involved. One of the reasons I think is because I typically feel very calm in the eye of the storm, or I want to be able to digest the macro message or environment that we're about to step into, and to communicate that in ways that are effective enough to be digested at the micro level for people, if for what matters to them. Why should I care? What's in it for me? And so that's something that I realized early on that I felt comfortable doing. I just simply wanted to be a part of change. Maybe selfishly, I wanted to be included and not left out. And then I realized as the years went by, I kind of enjoyed doing this, and I'm okay with dealing with ambiguity. And I do know, however, that when this change is coming down the pipeline, impacting any number of teams, I think I have the skill, or I definitely, there is the need for these people to be attuned to what matters most to them, and how to get them to care, and how to march them down that journey. And so that's how it started for me in 2002. And then you can repeat that experience with another company later in my career at Pragmatic. Looking back, when I think about why did I apply for this award in the first place, it's simply because I think in over the course of my job search, I realized that if I do a retrospective on my career, change has been so prevalent in what I've been privy to. And I always, though I did manage change, I found that I primarily led change because I had to be and wanted to be forward thinking and strategic and visionary and innovative, and taking things away from the status quo and into, just propelling things forward. So that's what's led me here today. I'm very thrilled to be part of this meeting, this group, and to have been nominated and to have won the award as a result.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I listened to your background, and one of the things that jumps out to me is that did change find you, or did you find change? And you also, reinforces maybe some of my thoughts around, those early career moments we have play a very significant role in shaping how we turn out. So you saying you started off where you had in a organization where you had to be agile, you had to be responsive, you had to take the lead, and that may just have, correct me if I'm wrong, but shaped your career trajectory going forward, in having that kind of forward thinking behavior in shaping, adapting, leading, and responding, to change.
It
Those are
did.
my thoughts.
Yeah, it did. It imprinted onto my DNA at an early stage in my career, and then I realized that I was comfortable with it, and that I was able to excel in that environment, and I wanted to do what I could to help, because I felt that I had the skill set, maybe intrinsically, and over time, of course, you learn more, you read, you take courses, and you just want to get better. So yeah, it did leave an imprint on me early in my career, and then I realized, and maybe to answer your question, Yvonne, it was forced upon me because of the environment and just the conditions of the economy, the business, and where we wanted to go. But eventually I found myself needing to get ahead of that curve. I didn't always want to respond to change. I wanted to initiate it on my own terms, for the benefit of the company, of course.
Yeah, and one of the things we teach on the change leadership program is, being proactive as change leaders, and agile and proactive. One of the things about empowering others, and that's a similarity between Wanda and Richard, yourself, where you speak about empowering others, and that is a skill of a great change leader, somebody, or just a change leader generally. You're empowering other people because you cannot do the journey alone. And it's easy for change leaders or people to think of change leaders, and or even change managers, as people who are wearing the cape, and they come in with the cape to save the world. And not necessarily, I always see myself in a change leader role as somebody who is there to help along the journey, help others along the journey. And it's not something that one person can do. We do it with a group of people. And that even speaks to why we had a committee, to be able to, assess who it was. It wasn't one person handpicking the various people to be who the change leader was going to be. So thank you for introducing yourselves, and we have more questions.
If
And
I might just say one thing, Yvonne, like one thing that I found with both Wanda and Richard's story is that sometimes we know that, like, even Richard even said status quo, right? So there's always a known path or a known way, and then there's this other path that sometimes people want to take but they don't, because they're like, but how do I do it? I don't see the way. And from both their stories I got that they're like, I'll make the way, and you can follow, can, like, I can lead the people through that. So that was inspiring to me, really.
yes, and you know how we're saying change leaders, but your stories show being change agents, being change makers, just making and leading the way through it. If you're listening live or watching the rebroadcast, if you have any questions, just type it in. We're going to be looking at questions. We want to hear your comments, and we're going to be coming back to the comments even if you're watching the rebroadcast. Wanda, coming back to you, tell us what the challenges have been. So it's one thing to say, oh, that number is now down, by 50%. It's 30 million girls now. So, that it's a lovely number to hear.
Yeah.
But I know it cannot have been easy. You tell us about how you started that organization, and it seems so simple. Oh, UNICEF closed down, so we just decided, I'll get a few of other people, and we'll start this organization. 2006. It's been quite a few years.
Yeah.
What are some of those challenges you've had to face being a change leader, and how have you overcome them?
Well, to give a little bit of context, we're a completely volunteer-run organization. So everybody pretty well works full-time, and we do this as our passion projects, which is great because we have volunteers who are totally engaged and very interested in really moving things forward. So over 99% of all the donations we receive go directly to the projects. We really work hard, and we work with partners. And so when we first started out, our objective really was access, to get girls, literally more girls, into school, into classrooms. And over the years, we keep following the research and the statistics and what's going on, the best practices around the world. And we realized that more and more girls were getting in school. As we mentioned, the number dropped down to 30 million, but kids weren't learning. If you've ever been to these communities, and we work in very marginalized, vulnerable, isolated communities, there's often very few qualified teachers. You have classrooms of 50, 60, up to 100 students. And so the kids are in class, but they're not learning. So we changed our focus a bit around 2010, 2011 to see what we could do to improve the quality of education in these projects, still working with our partners. And so we actually set up a research and development team within 60 million girls. So we said, okay, we're going to have a team dedicated to scouring the world, see what the best practices are, because we felt sure that somebody was doing something amazing somewhere. We just didn't know about it. And so as we were doing that, we followed the work of different researchers and different people, and we came up with what we called, our model called the Mobile Learning Lab. So it was actually to bring ed tech to these very isolated communities. And you have to imagine these communities very far from any big cities or towns, often don't have electricity in these areas or cell phone contact, certainly don't have access to the internet. And so, but we thought, what a computer or content like that can bring to these communities where it's almost impossible to get textbooks and so on, and where there's very low teacher training. So our idea was to have a server and to provide the content, so interactive content, educational content, games, and so on for children, and bring that directly to the community. And we originally started with a USB stick and then worked up to a Raspberry Pi, and now we use a larger service, but we provide tablets to the students to connect wirelessly to this content, and they can look at whatever they want. So it's really self-directed learning. In any case, it's quite a interesting model. But But we had a lot of trouble convincing our partners at the time to use it, because they were saying, well, why would we give expensive tablets or computers in these communities? We'll just give pens and papers. And we said, well, no, that's not the idea at all. It's really to bring knowledge and information and content. So, excuse me. So that was probably one of the most difficult things we had for the first couple of years. But to be able to counter these comments that we were getting back, we decided, well, we need to do a lot of monitoring and evaluation. So trials, we did, major projects where we followed 1,000 kids for a year in different communities. And we felt that with that data, with the facts that we're seeing in the field, that would help convince people that, yes, this is the way to go. Since that time when we first introduced it, there's about 400 mobile learning labs in use in over 20 countries around the world. And a lot of our partners have picked it up as part of their strategic planning. And so they're implementing it on their own. So it's not even all our funding for these things, but some of the major organizations around the world are using it now.
This is just fantastic. So even though your category was community, it just goes to show you still had to bring in innovation into what it was. You had to be innovative. What I found interesting about what you just shared was, you brought up something that a lot of change leaders face when we're leading and managing change, which is resistance to change. And this wasn't even facing resistance to change from the people who were going to be the recipients of the change. You also had to manage resistance to change from people who were your partners to help you implement the change. So, and that is true of any change that we want to do, whether we're implementing change in the workplace. And, we have various stakeholder groups that we need to manage in the workplace, in the community, across the world. And our stakeholders are not only those people who are recipients of the change, but they're just sometimes our partners, our projects, the project managers who are working side by side, our sponsors, and our partners who are implementing this change. We still have work to do in terms of bringing everybody on board, in terms of understanding the change. And another thing that I just absolutely wonder about what you said was the use of data. And data is becoming a big thing when it comes to leading and managing change now, because in the past, or not even in the past now, people say, oh, change is all about people and it's all about the heart and it's all about emotional, and they feel that it's not measurable. And what we're doing now, and a lot more innovative and forward thinking people are having to do and think about how we lead change, is that we also need to bring in that quantitative data as well when it comes to leading change. Because how do we influence people? It's not just about telling people why this needs to be done. We have to understand that there are different stakeholders, and we also need that qualitative data to sometimes show to people that this is why we need to change. This is what the data is saying. This is why there is a need. So thank you for being that example of the importance of, data when it comes to leading change and how to make a difference, and, a great example of how to manage resistance to change. So thank you for that one.
You're welcome.
Richard, what's it been like in your own journey in terms of having to overcome some of the challenges of starting something afresh, bringing people on board with you? Leading change in a startup is hard, and always having to introduce new solutions and new ideas into organizations. What has been some of your key challenges, and how have you overcome that?
I can answer that question by maybe tying in project management methodologies. And by that, I mean, we were at a point in time with one of my employers where, from a product development standpoint, we decided to go from a waterfall project management methodology to an agile and a scrum. So I can tell you know what I'm referring to. And then if you want to add on top of that, we read a book which was quite influential for us called The Lean Startup by Eric Rice. And it talks about MVP, a minimum viable product. So why do I bring this up? Because we started, especially the CEO, he was a very big adopter and champion of the Lean Startup methodology and what that, its prophecy and what it asked a product dev team to do. And so as I realized that as we were going through this MVP process, the problem that it introduced onto my department, which was customer success, is from a change standpoint, is when you are incrementally releasing iterations of this new product. In this case, for us, it was a very important thing. It was our provisioning portal. When it's incremental changes, there's a sense of delayed gratification, right? Because my team is expecting, the full Monty. They want the fully developed product. Now, that's not going to happen when you follow an agile approach and an MVP approach. And so from a change management standpoint, I found myself constantly having to motivate the team, inspire them, and to gauge their level of patience and tolerance for the things that they wanted and needed to do with this new provisioning portal, which they could not yet do until maybe months down the road. What did that mean to them? It meant that they still had to keep using the existing clunky provisioning portal in addition to the new portal. And so you're swimming in both waters, right? And that was difficult just to stay in the appropriate headspace. So from a change management standpoint and how that impacted my team, it was a question of balance and staying attuned to the tolerance level of the team. I also spent much more time than usual becoming a product owner with the development team to be the champion or the voice of the customer, if you will, for my team, so that they knew where we were being pinched and let's call it the repercussions of this approach. We were all in. We understood why we were doing it this way, but it was a lot of delayed gratification and a lot of double dipping for my team and what they had to do. I, of course, would communicate to my boss, the CEO, from time to time, and to let him know how this was impacting our team, and just not to say that we were pulling out and not going to participate, but rather to let him know that there are emotions and feelings and like I said, tolerance involved. And if we get to the breaking point, he needs to know. And then we never did get to the breaking point, but just constant motivation, inspiration for the team, and also sharing with them milestones. Team, where we're here right now, we've got 25% of this new portal released. It's live. And, here's the next milestone. Can we work towards it? Let's celebrate that milestone when it happens. So that's maybe my best example for some of the challenges that I've experienced.
And that's a big one, Sneha, wouldn't you agree? Keeping people motivated.
That is a slippery slope, right? Motivation. But sounds like you found your own way to use data to, propel the team. Yeah.
Yes, and one of the things you just exemplified there in a very practical way was empathy. Because when people think of empathy, as a way of leading change, people think, oh, empathy is so, feely, is there room for empathy in the workplace? But you talk about having to step into the shoes of your stakeholder, of your team, to understand what it was that they were doing, Richard, so that you can better support them. And empathy is often about that, understanding your stakeholders a little bit more, your team members a little bit more, your colleagues a little bit more. But one group people forget to lead with empathy when working with is their leaders as well, and their sponsors and their partners, and people above them. You often think, oh, just empathy to the team, but we can apply empathy all around to see how does this affect people. Why would they be thinking in this way, so that we can adapt our style to more effectively lead and manage the change. As I'm just listening to some of the great work you're doing, it just reminds me of why the Change Leadership as an organization decided that, to do this awards, and maybe Sneha, why did you decide to be part of it? I can say we decided to do this because we wanted to recognize the different works that we see where people are doing it. They may not have that change management title, but they're doing change leadership work, and it's becoming more and more important. But why did ACMP and even yourselves decide to volunteer to be part of this?
I think we discussed this during our first LinkedIn live session, but I mean, honestly, to reiterate, one of the biggest reasons that I was definitely motivated to be part of this team was because so one thing, even when Wanda was talking today, right? This has happened in my life as well, where I'm like, this is a problem. But then sometimes it's hard to ignore the problem and move on, right? And like, it seems like we have this like Herculean task, but then just knowing others' stories, recognizing that like their effort. I mean, for example, with Wanda, her story started like years and years ago, like maybe 2 decades ago. With Richard, things like maybe because you're in customer success, I don't know. But then knowing your audience, what motivates them, what drives them, those kinds of things, it is very helpful to know. I do think we should honor these leaders because, well, this is, oh yeah, I remember what I said. This is like my peeps, right? The change peeps. Even that day when we were in the Change Leadership Awards, it felt like everyone felt so great. You could feel that energy in that room with everyone being with their colleagues, so to speak. And that was my main reason, just to honor these leaders and
Yeah.
learn from them. Yeah.
And one of the big things, as well for us was that what we recognize more grows more. What we put more attention on has that
Mhm.
ability to grow.
Good
And
point.
it's
So much.
really about saying to any and everybody watching this or this, seeing these change leaders that we're spotlighting today, that anyone can be a change leader. Wanda, you didn't have any change management title, and look at the phenomenal change you're leading. And that's what it's about, to say every and anybody can be a change leader, especially in today's business environment, especially in today's dynamic environment, especially in today's world where we have so many things going on that are not so right. But everybody has the ability to help drive and make one change and or the other. And one thing we always talk about, that it's not about always the methods, the methodologies and all of that. We can all be change leaders, but talking about methods and methodologies and ways of doing things, what strategies, Wonder, have you used or come to mind when it comes to being able to influence, lead, or enact change? What are those tools that you would share with us that have been beneficial, or strategies?
Well, I guess my feeling is seeing is believing. When we developed the mobile learning lab, we had done research, we had good background and good information. We worked with a team at McGill as well and developed, questionnaires and evaluations. But I remember when we first brought the idea forward of just handing over these tablets to these children in grade 5 who'd never touched a computer before and said, let's just put it in their hands. We'll walk away. And I know from all our research that they'll be able to connect to the server and they'll be able to get the information. And our partners were looking at us like, you got to be kidding. These are expensive things. These are young children. It's going to be terrible. It won't work. And I said, well, let's just try it. I said, what can we lose by trying? So we did it. And I still remember the feeling that day when we handed out the tablets to the kids. And again, they've never touched a computer or a tablet before. And they're playing on it, and they grew more and more animated, and they're talking to their friends next
Oh my
to them.
gosh, that must have been goosebump.
It really was, because everything that we had looked at in the research was really coming true. And these kids became so animated, and they were working together in groups. They were able to, even turn the tablet on was a brand new thing for them. It took them about 15 seconds. One child figures it out, and then the whole class finds out immediately. Took them about 15 minutes to connect to the server, again, completely on their own. And they were dancing around and they were having fun. And it was such a stark difference to what a classroom is normally like. This was happening in Sierra Leone. And even our partners were in shock. And then afterwards, when we asked the children, how did you feel about this? And they go, oh, this was so much fun. And there's a lot of discipline in a lot of these countries. There's, caning going on. They go, we could learn, free from any fear, and we loved it. And we've known ever since we did that back in 2012, children just flock to these mobile learning labs because it is fun, and it's a way for them to learn on their own freely about, any topic they want. It's all academic topics, but they have this freedom. So I knew in that moment when our partners were standing beside us and actually saw it, well, they obviously became believers at that time. But as I mentioned, it's still important to have the data, to show the impact of what you're doing, because as you said, it could be nice stories and it's very touchy-feely and it's, all nice things. But the bottom line is, if you're investing in these projects, you want to make sure they have the greatest impact possible.
So to me, it sounds as if you made this very tangible for people. You made it real, whether in the students or your stakeholders or the people who are receiving the change. It wasn't about bringing them to a classroom and teaching them. It was about piloting it with them. And you've said something repeatedly, and I wonder whether that's a strategy you rely on as well, which is research. Doing the research and learning about information and data. Would you say that's like a key strategy for you in terms of a lot of things you've done, research about your audience, research? You mentioned research again when you spoke about you wanted to get into leading and driving this type of change. You did a lot of research to learn about it. During the change, you've done a lot of research, to learn about how to implement this, how people will receive this change, and not just saying this is how I think about it. And then you've done another type of research where you spoke about, you did evaluations and surveys. You spoke about another type of research where you did a pilot. So it just seemed as if you were learning in terms of what to do and not coming with some other method or approach or saying this is how they've always done it, so this is how we're going to do it. Because some of these strategies you spoke about even the mobile technology and wanting to do it, you face a lot of resistance to change because people felt it'd never been done before. But you always had that research that backed up your feeling of what needed to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, having a feeling, I mean, we did have a feeling, we had a gut instinct, like this could really work, and we could see down the road just, how far we could bring it. But again, there's not a lot of dollars in international development. There's certainly not enough money for the size of the problems and challenges that there are. So, very much for ourselves too, as a foundation, when we invest in any project, we want to make sure it's going to have the greatest impact possible. So you don't want to be guessing. You want to go in and saying, okay, I've done my homework. We've looked at the research. We've looked at the studies. We've seen what's happening. And we strongly believe that this will work, and we evaluate it. It's constant monitoring and evaluation, getting reports back from the field. And, we're still getting reports back from projects we did 5, 6, 7 years ago. So we can see the evolution. And that's what enables us to go even further with it. At this point, we're looking to add climate action to the servers, because it's a huge problem, obviously around the world, but in developing countries in particular. They're being extremely badly hit by weather extremes. So that's another potential use that we're going to use going forward.
Awesome. Richard, I want to take this to you. So you come from an organizational change, leadership, and change management perspective of implementing change in organizations. So you'd be quite familiar with a lot of those structured methodologies and models and all of those. What role would you say methodologies, models have played? What roles have they played in the change that you're using, or which do you have any go-to?
Well, the role that they play for me is reassurance that I'm doing it the right way, or at least the best possible way. So if I refer to maybe some models, there are some that I think I did intuitively or instinctively, and looking back, I now realize that I was following the head, heart, hand model, for example. Am I going to be dealing with and talking to people from a logic-driven standpoint, which is my primary means of managing or leading change? Or is it a heart-based approach, meaning is this going to be people-focused and I adapt accordingly? Or is it going to be hand-driven, meaning this is more to do with a process approach? So I've used that just to attune myself to how people are going to respond to the message that I'm conveying and the call to action of the change in question. People are going to digest the information in their own different way. And I think if you have a certain level of awareness, and this, you mentioned this earlier as well, a change leader need not be a leader per se by title. It could be anyone. So I found myself oftentimes leading change that went beyond the boundaries of my customer success department. So, how does the sales team think? How do they behave? Will I rub them the wrong way if I'm speaking to them and hijacking one of their meetings? Well, I can assure you that them seeing an operational presence in their meetings, it's going to ruffle feathers. I know that from experience. And so you need to acclimatize yourself accordingly and position your message and so forth. How will the marketing team receive me? If I am implementing or leading change and it impacts the IT team, will they think, this guy, does he know what he's talking about from a technical standpoint? Do we speak the same language? So the heart, hands, head model I've used, the Kubler-Ross for sure. And I think the way that if I were to step back, the means through which I think I've been successful in leading change is understanding that the moment we're going to make an announcement in the company that change is going to be imposed upon someone, I already know, I sense that there already is probably 1, 2, or 3 more initiatives currently underway. And so along comes one more change initiative. And so it's never going to be as simple and as black and white as, everything's normal, everyone is bored, let's do something different. It's more of a question of, the ship is already on the high seas and we're trying to manage the thing that we launched 7 months ago. Now you want us to do something else. So I find myself just positioning the message, which is important. Why now? Why is this important? And then, going back to earlier comments, just paint your picture with that call to action as to why the status quo is unacceptable and why that end game, that vision, is where we need to be. And that goes a long way. But I pull myself away from the immediate discussion when the CEO says, Richard, do this. And I'm like a helium balloon. I'll pull back into the macro, kind of assess what the collateral damage might be, and then go back into the micro and appreciate how I'm now going to go about, collaborating cross-functionally with other teams and so forth. So those are some of the scientific techniques, if you want to call it that. Techniques, and others have been just instinctive or intuitive.
Yeah. You raise a good point, Richard. Then, you say something about, you've used some methods and sometimes you go, these methods had any name and even wonder yourself, you've used strategies and you've not given names to them, but, these are things that you're doing. So, there's so many times a lot of people, especially people who are new to leading change, they put a lot of emphasis on models and methodologies and learning. Very quickly, as we round up this discussion, I'll do a quick fire round and then I will come back to you to dig just a tad bit into it. Is leading change, is it innate or is it learned? Or how would you describe it? So starting with you, Wanda.
That's a tough question. I think, a little bit like Richard mentioned earlier, some people resist change very drastically and other people are a little bit more open to it. So, from my point of view, I'm always looking for new ways of doing things. There's got to be a better way. Let's try something else. Let's see what other people are doing. Let's look at best practices. I don't know everything, so I can certainly learn from other people. And then, these different gems sort of drop out from the sky. I go, oh yeah, I think maybe I could try that and, give it a try, put it in place. I have a great team that I work with and all their perspectives really help, solidify a decision that we make. But I think probably to a certain extent it's innate because you feel comfortable with it.
Okay, I like that. Richard?
I agree. I think to an extent, if you use the analogy, a diamond in the rough, I think a change leader would be a diamond in the rough, but an effective, successful change leader, a polished diamond, is one that has gone through trial by error, has scraped his or her knees through experience and trials and tribulations, and has done the training or taken some courses. Then they become a polished diamond. But I think initially you need some of that in your DNA. It's part of your personality. Like I mentioned as well, are you a moth to a flame? Are you seeking that change? Are you a forward-thinking type of an individual that wants to lead the change and take the horse by the reins and make it all right? And I think personality-wise, you either perhaps have that or you don't. So broad strokes, I think it's generally innate, but it can be finessed. And you can certainly be a change leader if you didn't think you could. There's a wealth of resources out there, and you can do it. But I think it helps more so if you already have that innate ability.
I love that. I love that you say a diamond in the rough. Sneha, what's your take?
I really wanted you to ask me as well. But I do agree. And the reason I agree is because, or maybe this is just my experience, I don't know, but from the stories I've heard, I found that a lot of people have the same experiences that when you're leading change, part of change, you mostly go through a lot of muck and like, or darkness before you're seeing the light or reach the light or find the light or something like that, right? And it takes like, we really need to have that kind of belief or interest or motivation towards that end goal, future state. We have so many terminologies, but really need have something internal to be able to drive yourself through that, like through all the darkness, through all the muck till you reach that. And I think that that's a bit innate.
It is. It is. You because sometimes as a change leader, leading, managing change, whether as a change manager, I sometimes say, why am I gotten for punishment? I say that, and as we round up, I'm gonna ask a question, and maybe one that I want you to really, maybe this may be a little bit more directed at you, but everybody answer. Has there ever been a time as a change leader where you have said, you've questioned, why am I doing this? Even in this work you're doing, like you've been faced with this big challenge of leading this organization, because sometimes the journey can be lonely. Have you ever questioned, why am I doing this, and what keeps you going?
Well, I think it's normal that different times things happen and you question it, and this is an unpaid job, so it's not my job that I have to be doing. Much like all the members of our of the foundation, everybody's a volunteer. But at the same time, I still have that same feeling inside of anger at what's going on in the world and this injustice that's being done. And I feel it's my job. I've been very lucky in life. I was born here in Montreal. I've had a good education. And I feel that I can't stop, in the sense that I do need to give back, whether it would be, whether it's continuing to be with girls' education, or climate change is a huge concern for me right now as well. I think what helps me the most when it gets to those tough times is because I have such an amazing team around me. Whenever I come up against what I look at as a real big problem or challenge, or just don't know how to go through it, get together with these women and we talk about it, and they're amazing. Everybody has a different point of view, different perspective, different experience. And as we're talking, go, oh, okay, yeah, okay, well, then I see the way to go forward to get through that door and get on to the next step.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Richard, what about you? Has any challenge ever made you question, and what keeps you going?
Well, what keeps me going is that I want to be involved in the change as opposed to being uninvolved. So that keeps me going, and I'm eternally curious and I'm restless. I just want to make things better. And if something's going to come down and impact my team or the company, I'd like to be involved. And do I question sometimes why I do it? I mean, I don't think people gravitate towards being a change leader because they want to win a popularity contest, because, employees are probably looking at you thinking, oh, great. Here she goes again with one more thing that's going to disrupt my life at work for probably the next year or a year and a half, whatever it might be. And so you need to brush that off and appreciate, of course, all the perks of being in that position, and to embrace that role. And one of the things that you can embrace the most is looking back when it's all said and done, and realizing that you were a big part of leading that change. And that's a feather in your cap. That's an achievement that you can be very proud of.
Awesome. Sneha, what about you? Managing and leading change at the same time. You volunteer at ACMP,
I mean, honestly, Yvonne, I have nothing more to add than what Richard and Wanda have said. But one interesting thing about Richard, what Richard just said is the curiosity aspect. That's something I've found as well. I mean, and again, I to be honest, haven't done a lot, but Wanda, with initiatives such as yours, it seems like what you're describing is like a fire. And usually for me, what propels me is either curiosity, or just that it would be so much simpler. I can see the ideal state, and that just that fire to help people sometimes. But I don't know, sometimes it's just a job, you have to do it, so you do it. But yeah.
I love that. Let's keep it real. Sometimes it's a job and you have to do it. And all of your stories just resonate with me on your whys, the whys we do this. And if I could even just sum up, what the three of you have said is that fiery vision. You see the bigger picture, and that's what change leaders are about. You see the bigger picture of where it is you're going. You have that passion, and that's, that fire that keeps you going to say, I can see this. People may not be able to see it, but you can see it and you keep on going. But Sneha, I have to love what you said. Sometimes it's a job and you just have to keep on going, And I resonate with, the challenges, because the Change Leadership Organization is like the conferences that we run. It's 90% volunteerism, that run those conferences. And every time, and I've said that in the conference, I think, why am I still doing this? But when you see the bigger picture, when we get to talk to change leaders like yourself, when we see that the ability to lead and drive change is not about return on investment for organizations, but it's about the community at large. It's about the world at large. It's about the difference we're making in employees' lives. It's about the difference we're making in people's lives and the stakeholders' lives. Those are the things that just keep us going and saying, we have to do this, and we continue to do this. And, just so thankful and inspired by all the both of you change leaders and all of the other change leaders that we will be speaking to. We're speaking to 2 more change leaders next week, and excited to be talking to them. Congratulations again to Wanda and Richard on this award. And we want to continue to spotlight you and the work that you're doing. And please connect with both of them on LinkedIn, check out their profiles, see what they're doing, see how you can engage with them, see how you can work with them. And Wanda, please, we need the best link that we can put about the work on the 60 Million Girls Foundation for people to check this work out, whether it's to volunteer with the work that that you're doing, donation or in kind or in person, whatever they're doing.
Yeah. All appreciated.
Maybe we can get this down to 20 million girls by next year.
There you go. That's a goal. It's a good goal.
Get it down. So thank you to all of you. Thank you, Sneha, on behalf of the committee, Change Leader Committee, and thank you to those who are listening as well. Please put in comments, connect with the guests today, and until next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Thank you, Sneha.
Bye.
Bye.